Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 242 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to set up the logic for our new ore priority system. Enjoy. So our first hookup uses the Givelite and Sapphirite. The Sapphirite, that's the best use of it, so we want to give that maximum priority. So in other words, there's no limitation. And we could check Givelite as well, where Givelite only goes into Givelite ore sorting and iron. So this is the only two uses of it. So as a result, it needs no limiting factor at all. Since this is ideal for both of its inputs, they should always just go here. And then we don't need this sorting warehouse here and any of its logic. And the lines are a little misaligned, which is something we're going to experience, so all that work making it lined up just to change it. But I like straight belts, and this is the better way. Although we could still potentially use this because we do need to kind of split the belts apart, because we have two solid belts of each, but we need to split them between these two sides. So we'll potentially use some of this space anyway. And using something like this might help for all of the setups, so it's probably good we're doing it. And we could always make it a little smaller here. Uh-oh. Oh, I was worried about the base spots being in the way, but nope. Just the crawler. There we go, we've got something a little more compact. Doesn't really need to go anywhere. Since we're going to leave these machines here, we'll have lots of open space here for doing whatever it is we need to do. So each of these will have ore split on both sides. And it can go up. And we'll just cut this off so it doesn't run for now. But that goes in. And since we're thinking about it, let's do the other two ore types. So since this logic is a little wrong now, we'll probably just need to pick it all up. And I do see that we did have some displays in the form of Nixie tubes to show how many resources we had in each one of these. So we should probably do something similar, and to keep them from cross-connecting, we'll do this. And I think with Nixie tubes, it didn't like anything or everything. So we're actually going to have to set these individually, which is a little annoying. But whenever you have warehouses being used to control logic like this, it kind of makes sense to do this, but it looks like we don't have enough space. So I guess we'll put it down here, somewhere where it will fit and not get in the way of anything. But it has to be connected to the last digit. There we go. Each one of these is a little different because of the position of all the poles. I really wanted all these to be exactly the same. I think most of them can actually be fairly similar to this, just as long as we make space for it. So Sadness, despite doing my best to make this nice and clean with all these, it still ended up where stuff got added on after the fact, and it became significantly less clean, but oh well. Luckily, all these belts are still attached to where they need to go, so we don't really need to modify them in any way. There we go. Now we got some Nixie tubes showing us how many resources are in there. If we ever need to go down there and look, just make it a little easier to understand what's happening. We want to move the signals in a slightly more standardized way here. Something like this, and hey, look at that, it just barely reaches, so hopefully we can reuse this. Let's make a blueprint. So now we can kind of copy this in place. to move the signal down. There we go. Green wire comes through and just gets sent to where it needs to go. It doesn't need to go anywhere on that one, so we'll do nothing. But we'll send it down here and up into our different processing types. So this goes in. I guess we'll just use the first slot here. Get all these hooked up in the same way. Okay. Well, taking care of sapphirite with the sapphirite sorting is the less desirable way. So to give this a priority, we need to say that we have above an X number of resource, because if it gets below that, it means that we're running low and that we want to give priority to the other method. So we'll say sapphirite has to be more than 500 for this to turn on. And it has, because all the things are above that point right now. And we checked with Jivalite, and it's the same way, where the only thing is the sorting. So we'll do Jivalite has to be more than 500 or halfway up for that to run. And then those are configured. So let's try the next one. We have copper, which is stereotyte and crotinium. So we have our belt combiner here. And it looks like it lines up down here. So let's check crotinium, and it does go into two things beyond just crotinium sorting, as it goes into copper and lead. So between these, which one is the most important? Well, probably the copper, because we just need a ton of copper. So that one should always be connected. However, with lead is the secondary way. So we'll find lead, which is right next door. So we'll line this up, and they come in. And we'll send a wire up. And make sure we've got them lined up to the exact thing, which I think it's the first one. So we should create a gap here to make them look the same. So it goes to there. And we'll want to say that crotinium is above a certain point before this can run. And what number? Well, we have 3 conditions. We'll say 300, because the higher priority, the lower number it gets to allow it to run under lower conditions. So there's our 300. Crotinium has to be more than 600, and it turns on, and it does. So that completes the 3 different ways of using crotinium. So now what about stereotyte? Well, it goes into its stereotyte crushing method, and of course, copper and tin. So of those, copper is the most desirable. So it just stays hooked up. The next one would be tin, which looks like it's right here. So we'll say if stereotyte is above 300, this one is allowed to turn on. And then the least desirable is just normal crotinium sorting, which is down here. It's already hooked up, but we'll say crotinium has to be more than 600 to go. Probably look a little cleaner if that did that there. But that's hooked up and configured. So what about lead? We already calculated the crotinium. So rubite goes into making lead and the rubite sorting. So there doesn't need to be any other condition for lead here, because rubite can go straight through, but crotinium can't. It needs to be above 300, so we'll use these conditions. But otherwise, that's good. And then we need to have rubite hooked up, and it has to be more than 500, and that'll go through. And that gets that there. Then it's time for tin. We've already calculated the stereotype, so now we need to do bobmonium. And this is the last thing on the list, so I'm thinking there's nothing left. And the ore sorting. It makes this a lot simpler not having to worry about the mixtures anymore because they have a priority of their own. So the best way of using bobmonium is right here. And we've already got the stereotype configured as well. Then that goes up. And the mixtures will always go through. And I believe that does it for all of the mineral catalysts, besides hybrid catalysts. So now we can push the belts down and get them hooked up. We can also do something similar as far as priorities with these catalysts as well, just in case we're running low. So to do that, we're going to need a warehouse somewhere. Let's just copy this here. I'll put it in exactly the same spot on the bus because that's how we did it everywhere else. And we'll need to get this signal hooked up and sent across, and it's kind of interesting how we have wires here not going anywhere. I think that went down for handling the crystallizers for the ore. So for now, just to make this a little cleaner because it's kind of messy, I'll just remove all of this. So we'll hook this up. This can be the mineral catalyst. We'll set this up to everything, and it has to be less than 1,000. Which means we don't need this setup on the end. And we will send the signal wire along the same way. So that's part of it now. Probably should make sure we're not messing up the bot network too much. It looks like there is a little gap in here. Is it right here? Oh, that's funny. We'll get it all figured out in the end here. It's a lot easier to place those once everything is done. So now we have a priority with our catalysts. And we need to get them all hooked up. There we go. That should get all that hooked up in here. Although for it to work correctly with the logic, because we have more than one belt, we might want to use a sorting warehouse for this, set to a very low number. And then we want to set a priority based on where these catalysts go. And we have 4 choices. Based on the amount of resources that we use, it seems like it would go iron, copper, tin, and lead for where we would use our resources. So, the highest priority of iron would always get the mineral catalyst. Then the second highest priority would be the copper. So we do need to connect that in here. And we'll say it has to be more than like 250 to make copper, and then more than 500 to make tin, and more than 750 to make lead. And with that, we should have all of those catalysts hooked up. Are we actually out of belts? We're getting close. Well, this looks a lot cleaner than it did before. The logic is still there, but it's not a giant mess of wires, and so it just looks cleaner. And as far as the mixtures, I'm not sure if we're really going to need any special logic, because this is almost certainly guaranteed to get there. And then grinding it down really only requires the lubricant. And this it requires a small amount of the chunks. So I'm not sure we really need to have logic attached to that, that if they are requested, they run, because they're all essentially really good methods. So we can hook all this up. And we got more methods we need to do, because now we have to handle the chunks. So let's clear the rest of this out. And we don't need this layer of buildings. Let's get them all hooked up again. Might use this as an opportunity to send things where they need to go, since I'm out of power poles. The ores will probably be sent to the wrong location. But the Bob stuff, I think we can all pick up. Well, it doesn't seem to be sending it to the right location. Oh well. I guess we won't do that. What, did you change your mind? Or you just want electricity and then you're going to go back the other way again? Well, I guess since we have the ore bus pretty much set up, we can start trying to place the logistic zones so the robots will start helping us. And then I guess we can push it all the way up here since it seems to fit alright. So we'll do these two. Okay, we've got some new ores to handle. Now we need to do the chunks. So let's copy this up. Okay, so we need sapphirite to make nickel. What does that go into? Just the nickel ore and the chunk sorting. So there doesn't need to be any logic on that one. We just need to put the logic where the chunks are being sorted, which looks like up here. So since this is less desirable, we'll say it has to be more than 500. And the other thing is rubite, which I can see right next door. It goes into nickel, silicon, and the chunks. And honestly, silicon is higher priority than nickel. So silicon needs no special condition. But the nickel needs one, because it's the second best one. We'll say has to be more than 300. And the worst way is the chunk sorting. So we'll say it has to be more than 600. So that gets that hooked up. Well, let's do bobmonium then. It goes into quite a few things. Silicon, zinc, and silver. I would say that silicon is the highest priority, because we use quite a bit of it with circuits. And then after that, probably silver, and then zinc, and finally the chunk sorting. And it does go into the cupric sludge, but it only requires 5 per second out of the 30 that we're making. So I'm hoping it'll just find its way there, even if we're low. So silicon is the best way, so it doesn't need to have any control circuit. It can just go in. That finishes that one. And then it's silver. So bobmonium has to be more than 250. And then it's zinc. Has to be more than 500. I notice that we have a little empty zone in here, so let's just put those in there. And oh, the power wire doesn't reach, but there we go. It's not quite there either. So let's pick this up. Put it up there, although I see that let's remove that. There we go. But the last method for bobmonium is chunk sorting. So it has to be more than 750 for this to occur. Well, we've got some stereotype here. And it only goes into silver and the sorting, which means no special condition needs to exist for silver, but it needs to be more than 500 for the chunks. Now we're at Jivolite, and it goes into a few things, one of which we're not actually making right now, fluorite. And that's actually something we may want to consider creating, because we're going to start creating a lot of acid soon for the purposes of all of these ore crystals. And as you can see, we're actually not maxed out on fluorite right now, so we could use more of it. And creating fluorite through chunks, I believe, is the best way of getting it. You can get it from like mineral sludge and fluoric wastewater, which comes from some stuff, like you can get it from acid puffers. But the fastest and most direct way is to make it with chunks. So we're actually going to add a new sorting method on here to make fluorite. And it does require the crystal catalyst and, interestingly, a little bit of ferrous powder. But that's fine, we can send it down here. So we'll have to keep that in mind when figuring out where these ores go. But of these, we probably use aluminum the most, then zinc, then fluorite, and then the chunks. So aluminum will get no special condition, which is right here. And the zinc is here, and it already has a condition for the ammonium. So we can just do a second one in line here. And it might look a little better if we connect it on the bottom one there. So to do zinc, it has to be more than 250. And the way this works is both ammonium has to be above 500 and Jivolite has to be above 250 for the ore to actually flow through here. At least consistently. It's possible some will skip by there, but both of these has to be on consistently for the ore to flow. And then the fluorite, wherever it will be 500. So then 750 can be the chunk sorting. And I kind of want to put like a constant combinator here just for the fluorite settings. So let's just do fluorite. We'll do 1 just to say that this is what this is for. We'll do fluorite. We'll put a sorting facility. And then the condition is the Jivolite at 500. Just so we can remember that when we place it down. It probably will be placed immediately right here because we don't want ores traveling farther than is necessary. So the soonest we can place it down, the better. And I don't think any of this is going to get any narrower because it's 2 belts of output and 2 belts of input and then catalyst. So these can't really be squished a bit. And there is an empty space here in case some of these were just so happen to be converted, but I don't want to smash those down just to get a few extra belts in there. But in doing this, we get zinc ready. So now zinc is hooked up, and the only one we still need to do is crucinium. And it only goes into aluminum and sorting. So since aluminum is definitely desirable, that goes straight in. Then catalysts go down there. And then we hook this up. For crucinium has to be more than 500. Okay, now we need to handle the catalyst. And see, it's a good thing we set this up the way we did, because there isn't enough of it to go around. Although this isn't set correctly, so that's partly why. But still, it's not quite filled, so this logic would definitely control what turns on and what turns off until it fills up. So we must be like completely out of stone. And we are. We've got nothing. Although we do have this stone from slag. So why isn't slag being used to make slurry? I guess it's always biased towards having a little bit of it left over, which kind of makes sense. So we're essentially out of minerals right now. So that makes sense. Certainly when we fire things up, it'll start building them again. But that's why we do these logics, so we can handle situations exactly like this, where we're low on resources. So let's hook this up, having just moved it over to the side, which lets us smash this one in here on the other side. Set for crystal catalyst, and we want to get it hooked up to the green wire, and there's nothing in there right now. And those are set to 1,000, which seems like pretty healthy numbers. We will hook that up. And we definitely have an enormous amount of crystal catalyst, which seems kind of odd that we have more crystal catalyst than the mineral ones, but that is the current condition. So now that they're in there, it can be hooked up. And it definitely has more than 1,000, so nothing is flowing. And then we just need to use our conditions to figure out what is the most desirable use of those catalysts. Well, certainly a lot of this stuff isn't relevant. Probably don't need to have a limiter on the gemstones or the crystal enhancers, because we probably just don't use very much of that, so it would be unnecessary and kind of overkill to have controls on that. And we're going to do hybrid catalyst later. But for now, we have silicon, nickel, aluminum, zinc, silver, and fluorite. Of those, we probably use aluminum in the greatest quantity. So on aluminum, it'll go straight through. And then I would say probably silicon, silver, zinc, nickel, and fluorite. With silicon, let's do 150. Silver, let's do 300. Zinc can be 450. Nickel can be 600. I think it covers all of them except fluorite, which we can make above 750. So let's just come in here and say 750 for that, so we know what the signal is. And that gets this hooked up. Oops, that's the wrong thing though. Gotta put it down here. And let's cut off the belts so we don't get any resource flow. And of course, the bus is like, where have all the resources gone? But they'll be back in a second. Although we probably do want to have a sorting warehouse right here. Just to send it both ways. Because we are going to need the resources down here as well. And we'll just take them down to the end there. And oops, looks like I forgot one. We do also have this supply depot. Might as well place it down here where it's closer to the resources that it's picking up. And we gotta hook up the wire as usual. Equal to or greater than 600, that sounds about right. And 6,000, that sounds really high. That could be where some of these resources went. Let's go with 2,000. It's like robots are finally starting to deliver stuff here. But I think that is most of the resources. Looks like it. Okay. Now that we have the bus sorted out, we can go to the part that is above it. but unfortunately expanding the ore sorting machines is going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.